discussing Fitchburg Now. I'm your host, Sam Squalia. Our show this week, we have the candidates for the Governor's Council in the 7th District of Massachusetts. First, we have Paul DiPaolo. He's the Democratic candidate. And then coming up after, we're going to have Jen Casey, who is the incumbent Republican candidate. And then after that, we're going to have members from the Fitchburg Emergency Management Agency come on to tell us what they do and the important things that they do within the community. All right, so first up, I have Paul DiPaolo, our Democratic candidate for Governor's Council of the 7th District of Massachusetts.
Nailed it.
Did I get it?
You absolutely did. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, so, you know, the first thing that I'd like to talk about with the Governor's Council is let's do an overview of what is the Governor's Council, because, you know, quite often people have no idea what the Governor's Council is. They get to the ballot and it says Councilor, and they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the problems, I think, and one of the reasons I chose to run. So I'll back up and say District 7 is 65 towns. It's defined by Senate districts, so it covers
65 towns.
That's right. So it's
cities.
And cities, yes, of course. And so it's 5 Senate districts. You know, you can think of it that way, and it's up and down Central Mass. And early on, like you said, it's a low voter knowledge race. So a lot of what we've had to do is teach people what the Governor's Council is. You know, a lot of people don't know what it does. As you said, even very politically engaged people who I'm working with don't even know who their counselor is. So it is low education, and that's part of the campaign. But to answer your question, Governor's Council is an 8-member body. It meets in Boston once a week. Its primary function is to approve or reject the governor's judicial nominees. So all of our state court judges, they're nominated by the governor, and there's a process behind that. And then they go before the Governor's Council, there's hearings, they're vetted, and ultimately voted up or down. So Governor's Council has the last say before anyone takes the bench in Massachusetts.
For state judicial nominees.
All of our state
judges.
Courts. Yep, from local, you know, from housing courts, probate court, family court, on up to the Supreme Judicial Court, which is our top court.
All levels of judges in Massachusetts.
Indeed, and they also do the same for the Industrial Accident Board, which is, you know, related to the workers' comp system. And it also does the same for the Parole Board. And there's some other small functions, but those are the ones that really affect, you know, policy in the state. Yeah,
according to mass.gov, the Governor's Council provides advice and consent on gubernatorial appointments, pardons and commutations, and warrants for the state treasury.
Yes, indeed.
So for the Industrial Accident Board, how does that work? How do those candidates work? How long is their term? You know, is that a life appointment? You know, how does that work?
So, you know, so we have a workers' compensation system in Massachusetts, right? And one thing that I've found has gained a lot of interest in the labor community is the Industrial Accident Board, because the workers' compensation system, in order for it to work, we need to be fair to employers, and we also need to be fair to employees, right? You know, when I got out of law school, I started in Boston doing corporate litigation, and I was defending a lot of power tool manufacturers, automobile manufacturers, and I dealt with liability issues with cars flipping over and people severing limbs and having catastrophic injury. And some of those overlapped with the workers' comp system. And what I saw is that people's lives are destroyed, you know, when they have these catastrophic injuries in the workplace. And if the system's working, then they're going to be appropriately compensated, right? And you know, they've paid into the system, the employer has paid in. So really what it comes down to is just making sure that we have fair-minded folks on the Industrial Accident Board who have seen both sides of the issue. You know, so we don't want ideologues who are
too pro-industry.
We don't want knee-jerk either way. Yeah. Right. We want a level head. So if you've worked, you know, on labor side or you've worked on employer side, that's fine, right? But I want to hear about the perspective of the candidates and how they're going to balance, you know, the experience they have with the fact that we're looking to apply things fair and equitably. Yeah.
And so maybe a varied amount of experience and perspective among the candidates on the board, is that?
I think so, yeah. And, you know, one of the things I bring to this race is my varied perspective and experience. You know, I mentioned I started in corporate litigation in Boston. I left that eventually to teach in the public high schools. I started out teaching high school English. I ended up developing alternative special education programming for at-risk teenagers. And subsequently, when my second daughter was born, I left and I have a solo law practice in Worcester now. But what I found as a teacher, after I had been a lawyer, was that I think having that outside of education experience made me a far better teacher. And I think that moving back into the law, and I do a lot of education law, being a teacher makes me a better education law lawyer. So I think that
having varied experience, not just in one area.
Right. So I talk a lot, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to talk about the juvenile courts and the way kids, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds, get caught up there. But having been in the schools working with them, it's a far different perspective than being an attorney working with these kids, is my experience, from speaking with folks who do the work. And so, yeah, varied perspective is important, I think, in every area of government, really in every area of life. So, I always encourage my students, don't box yourself in. Keep your options open.
So on encouragement, that you said there was one reason that you wanted to run was to talk about what the Governor's Council is. What inspired you to run for this position? Because this is a position, 65 cities and towns, did you say?
That's right.
And 5 Senate districts. That's a big race.
And ultimately, I mentioned they meet once a week. The salary is a little over $30,000. So this isn't a glamour position. This isn't something you sit down and kind of watch the money roll in for a 6-year term. This is a 2-year term. You really have to love it, and you really have to have a passion for it. And really what drove me to run is, first of all, judges matter. That's my tagline. Judges matter. And for me, they matter especially in the lives of kids. Because if we catch kids early and we can divert them out of the criminal system, we're not only giving them a life of opportunity, but ultimately we're improving society because we're not spending money incarcerating them. And we have productive members of society rather than folks who've kind of, along the way, had gaps in their education, gaps in their social and family and home life, and end up far more likely to be incarcerated as adults. So seeing that happen and seeing the wide variety of judges who are on the bench and the approaches that they take, and knowing that as an attorney, attorneys know the score. They know which judge feels which way on a lot of issues.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm glad I got this judge for this case.
Sure. And even in commercial law, you have a feeling for how judges are going to rule, and it's called forum shopping. Sometimes in the interest of their clients, lawyers seek to remove cases from one court and have them placed in another. And
whatever's to the advantage of your client.
And that's the role of being an advocate. But I think we'd be a lot better off if the system was kind of fair and equitable and balanced across the board.
And are you seeing that it is, or are you seeing that in ways that you can make a difference? What are your qualities that you feel that you can bring and to the Governor's Council?
Yeah. So the juvenile justice piece ties in with criminal justice reform, right? So for a while, there was this notion of being tough on crime, that was a solution to some of society's problems in the Commonwealth. And certainly, crime is a problem, obviously, right? Although crime rates have been going down in the last several years. Unfortunately, tough on crime policies, they sound good, they feel good, we want criminals to pay a price, right? But the tough on crime policies that the incumbent has stood on for the last decade or so while she's been in office, they've failed, and they've been repudiated. The State House, the legislature, just overwhelmingly passed criminal justice reform. There was bipartisan support for it. Governor Baker signed it into law. And it really takes a hard look at making sure that, yes, violent criminals, drug dealers, folks who are toxic to our communities are indeed incarcerated, whereas nonviolent offenders who we can divert, right, and keep them away from prisons where they're bound to get hardened. I mean, no one knows anyone who went to prison and came back better. It doesn't really happen.
It's not a necessarily reform institution?
No, and it's not because people aren't working hard to make it that way. It's because a lot of times there's not the resources to do what needs to be done. So we have an opioid crisis going on. It's been going on for a while, actually. And tough on crime policies talk about locking people up for possession, for example, right? That's expensive. $60,000 to $65,000 a year to lock someone up. Again, you're interrupting their work life, you're interrupting their home life, their family life, their education in a lot of cases. So what's going to happen? They're bound to come out and have less opportunity than when they went in. If they haven't gotten support, mental health counseling, addiction counseling, whatever it is, then what have we accomplished? What we've accomplished is to feel good about punishing and being tough, but pragmatically we're failing because it's costing us. For me, it's a moral failure, but it's an economic failure.
And our general society is going towards from a model of criminal behavior for drug, use to this is a mental concern, a health concern. It's
a tragedy because it's had to come this far where everyone. Oh, I don't want to speak for you. I certainly know folks who've been affected by the opioid crisis.
Everyone.
Right?
That you can say everyone's been affected.
Exactly, and the tragic silver lining here is that we're beginning to see that if we don't treat the root cause of the problem, then all we're doing is pushing it down the road. And so we've seen families devastated, whole communities devastated by this, and locking people up is not the answer.
So
now the dealers.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
I was just going to say, are you talking about leniency for nonviolent offenders?
I'm not talking about leniency for anything. I'm talking about solving the problem. Violent offenders, drug dealers, right? We need them off the streets. That's the solution. We don't want people dealing drugs on the streets. We don't want people who are violent out in our communities. So that's the solution to that problem.
Yep.
If you're coming into the courts for a nonviolent offense related to drug possession, right, and there's not a history behind it, of other offenses where you're a chronic offender, then there's tools at the court's disposal to divert them into, for example, treatment programs. They actually cost less most of the time than locking them up, and they have far higher, proven success rates, which reduce recidivism, right? Recidivism is the idea of the revolving door prisons, that people come out and a very high percentage are right back in within 2 years. So again, what have we accomplished? We've spent a lot of money and maybe we pat ourselves on the back for feeling tough. But ultimately, we could use that money in a lot better ways. Even before criminal justice reform recently passed, there were already programs in place where some of these nonviolent offenders could be diverted away from, rather than the House of Corrections, into programs where they would get treatment. Still in a state facility, not totally free, but getting treatment. Evidence shows that it works. In Worcester County, now this seat is not countywide, but some of the statistics that are out there, Mass Inc. is a think tank that's done a lot of research on this.
Yep.
In Worcester County, those diversion options have only been used 1 in 10 times over the last 5 years.
In Worcester County?
In Worcester County. Now,
so
listen,
we're heavy on harsh penalties.
We're not alone. It's a statewide thing. But 1 in 10 is too low. It shouldn't be 10 out of 10 because every case is different, and that's why we have judges. They need to exercise their discretion. But to me, 1 in 10 is too low. I think that as society's perspective has shifted, and this is part of how our government works, right? The judiciary tends to be more conservative and keeps things, it tries not to make jarring moves, right? In fact, we can think of all the jarring moves that have happened from the judiciary because it happens relatively infrequently. But as society's perspectives have shifted, and again, evidenced by criminal justice reform, bipartisan support, Governor Baker signs it. It's time for our judges to embrace that philosophy, right? In Massachusetts, it's not technically lifetime appointments. It's mandatory retirement at 70, although there are ways around that sometimes.
There are ways around that.
Sometimes folks stay a few years longer, but essentially, we have this turnover that happens. In fact, it's interesting because it makes it predictable that it's going to happen. Our Supreme Judicial Court.
We know when they're going to be 70. And we just had a large turnover of Supreme Court judges.
And we're going to have more.
A year or so, right?
We're going to have more in the next term. So whoever the governor is, let's say it's Governor Baker again. That'll be 8 years where Governor Baker will have put quite a stamp on the Supreme Judicial Court. For what that's worth, right? So you're getting one perspective putting judges on there. And so, it's important to have a check on that, and it's important to have scrutiny placed on it.
And we also have a parole board,
Industrial Accident Board.
Yeah. And when it comes to the parole board, I've heard a lot of talk about what do you advocate? Do you advocate for victims' rights? Do you for parole board members? Is that something that is strong with you? I know that there's been talk with that of other candidates.
Indeed. I mean, obviously victims have a right to be heard. I mean, I honestly don't know anyone who disputes that. So I'll embrace that. Victims do have a right to be heard. They do have a right to be present. when appropriate, when it comes up, right? So yeah, I mean, ultimately, again, it's the same. We need common sense and compassion and civility in our Governor's Council, and we need common sense from our parole board, right? And again, I speak to the background and the perspective, you know, varied backgrounds. I'd prefer to see varied backgrounds among each individual candidate, but at the very least, varied backgrounds among the entire board.
As a whole. All right, so yeah, let's see what the other things. What differences would you look for between regular and adult court judges and those for juvenile courts?
So the juvenile court, I mentioned how being an educator, particularly a special educator working with at-risk kids, really helped me as far as approaching this issue in particular.
Right, from a perspective.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna share a story, and like, I want judges who understand each step of the process. So I had a student, I taught in one of the alternative programs I taught in was in a town down on the Rhode Island border. This student was living in foster care. He got caught stealing candy from a convenience store. He was referred to the courts as a child requiring assistance. The actual technical term is a stubborn child.
Really?
And yes, and so, you know, in that situation, what typically happens is you have a hearing set in the future. There's a determination about what is going to happen with the child. In this case, the child was not taken into custody, rightly so, was released back, but conditions are placed on him or any child in this situation. So one of the conditions was a 10 p.m. curfew. So this is a teenager who has a very difficult background behind him. He's already making bad decisions. His school, quite frankly, doesn't have the resources to provide what he needs as far as counseling and support and remediation in terms of his education. I mean, he's behind educationally, so he acts out in class. It's a whole cycle. He broke the curfew because he's a teenager. I was lucky to grow up in a very stable home in Shrewsbury, and if I did something like that, I'd get grounded, you know. And this kid ended up back in the court, and he was put in a state facility, and the facility was up in Lancaster.
Harsh punishment.
Well, you know, tough love.
Yep, okay.
And so I didn't agree with it, and the reason I didn't is because I know what happens in that facility. I know that social workers have some of the hardest jobs on the planet, but if we're not adequately resourcing them, they can only do so much. So this kid's getting bullied, he's getting into fights, he's not having a good time there, he's not getting counseling, and he's getting woken up very early in the morning to get in a van and drive an hour plus from Lancaster down to the Rhode Island border. So you can imagine this at-risk kid, he's coming to school carrying a boatload of trauma and resentment, and he's bound to act out. I mean, he's just bound to act out. It's predictable. And so when he does whatever it is, if maybe he tells off a teacher, maybe he skips class, whatever it is, again, if that happened to me in high school, I get a detention, you know?
Yep, but
this kid is back in the courts. And so this is what happens. And so this is the cycle. This is what people call the school to prison pipeline.
So you're looking for a leniency or an understanding from judges?
I don't like the term leniency. I'm looking for an understanding. I'm looking for judges who get it and get what's actually going to be in the best interest of the child.
Right.
And sometimes the best interest of the child is not necessarily the harshest possible response. Right. Because what happens again is that they're far more likely to be incarcerated as adults. They're not getting a good education because it's constantly interrupted. They have no support system. You know, a lot of these kids, again, are in the foster system or whatever the case may be. And they end up incarcerated as adults. And this is in one of the richest states in the richest country in the history of the wordo. And this is what's happening.
A lot of different things to look out for, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This Paul DiPaolo, our Democratic candidate. Do you want to say a few words about what your website is, how people can contact you, maybe your phone number?
Yeah, absolutely. Please check out my website at pauldepalo.com. That's pauldepalo.com. Find me on Facebook. If you're near Worcester, come by Worcester on Monday morning, 8 o'clock at the Hilton Garden Inn. Congressman McGovern's going to be there, a whole host of luminary state reps and state senators and elected officials from around the district to kind of celebrate this campaign and talk about some of the issues we talked about today. Phone number is 508-215-8894. Happy to talk to any constituent, happy to talk to any voter. And I'm really looking forward to this campaign. I think there's a lot of contrast to be had between myself and you know, the long-term incumbent. And I think, you know, I'm looking forward to voters getting a chance to see what those are.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul DiPaolo. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back. Sam Squalia here with Susan Navarre of the Fitchburg Historical Society, and we're talking about the documentary Maracana that will be playing Saturday, June 2nd, 6 p.m. at the Fitchburg Historical Society. What's this documentary about?
Well, it's about an extraordinary upset in the world of world soccer.
Or football.
Football in many parts of the country, there are many parts of the world, you're right. In that year, the World Cup was held in Brazil, and it was expected that Brazil would win because they were a monster team. They always win, that's right. And the Uruguayan team had a huge upset. And so this is a movie that shows lots of scenes from the game and also interviews the players. So you find out, how did this happen? And it's a fun come from behind. And the Consulate General of Uruguay in New York is bringing it to Fitchburg and showing it at the Fitchburg Historical Society.
So this is a great connection.
Exactly. It's a great way, I think, for people who are interested in sports history or just in Fitchburg to learn a little bit more about the Uruguayan population.
And this is also put on with the Comité de Vecinos?
Yes, exactly.
The Committee of Neighbors.
Exactly.
In Fitchburg.
Of Fitchburg, yes. They were the ones who connected us with the Consulate General of Uruguay. So we're very excited about this opportunity to bring this nifty movie to the Historical Society, show it for free, and have a chance for people to get together and sort of celebrate the world of soccer, celebrate the world of Uruguay, especially because this year is a World Cup year.
Yes.
So everybody's getting pretty excited about the soccer season coming up.
So that's Saturday, June 2nd at the Fitchburg Historical Society, 6 p.m. It's free to all, and it's Maracana. It's a documentary on the Uruguayan win in 1950 against Brazil. All right, fantastic. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Probably one of the youngest.
Welcome back to Discussing Fitchburg Now. We have our second candidate for governor's counselor, our incumbent, Jen Casey, the Republican candidate.
Good evening, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah. So we just spoke with Paul DiPaolo, and now we have you. You are the only Republican candidate out of all 8 districts in Massachusetts. How does it feel to be the one Republican?
You know, it's funny, they refer to me as the lone Republican, and sometimes I feel like I should be at the panel at ESPN and put on the lone, the lone wolf ears and howl. But it's really, for me, it's about the issues and the candidates. So it doesn't faze me, the political party affiliation. And working with 7 Democrats, you either have to be effective and be issues focused, or you get weighed down in the mud and you talk about stuff that isn't important to the lifetime appointed judges. But I bring a perspective. I mean, we hear a lot about the need for diversity and different opinions. I'm very much public safety oriented, victims' rights. I advocate strongly against activist judges, and some of my colleagues have different views of the universe and what they think is important. But for me, it's always been safe neighborhoods and keeping our kids safe and holding judges accountable, which is a real big issue these days. It has been an issue since I first ran in 2010, and I'm hoping that there's momentum that we can get some type of legislation passed that we have meaningful reviews of judges. So, a Republican, but I just go up there and do my job, as Bill Belichick would say. Do your job, right?
Do your job, that's right. Yeah, so you work to approve the governor's appointments of judges. So what does that look like? What is your weekly job when it comes to the appointments of judges? As you say, you try to look for judges that are not activist judges. What does that entail?
Okay, well, I'm a practicing attorney, so I'm in court. I think it's fair to say I've probably been in every court in my district, whether it's been housing court. We had a housing court nominee today, a confirmation hearing, probate and family court, in criminal court, superior court, district court, as a defense attorney and as a special prosecutor in both courts. I've been in front of the Department of Industrial Accidents.
You've run the gamut of
I've seen good ones and bad ones.
Yeah.
And for me, what that means is we get packets on each nominee, extensive documentation, a JNC, judicial nominating application. We get bios, resumes, letters of recommendations. We meet and speak to the nominees before the hearings, and we go through all of of this. And in addition, the Governor's Council has their own questionnaire. So you have somebody's entire life before you when we're reviewing, for myself, doing my due diligence in preparation for these confirmation hearings.
And how long do you have to review a judge, for example?
Usually it's a week, sometimes it's 2 weeks. For example, we had Supreme Judicial Court confirmation hearings, and that was a very arduous process. We scheduled those.
Because those are lifetime appointments?
They're all lifetime appointments.
They're all lifetime
but
appointments.
These are the judges who can make the policies that impact the laws at the top of the food chain in our state, the Supreme Court. So you go through all of the information that you have before you, you make your calls, you do your due diligence. And you know, I know you're on your city council. A lot of the work means showing up prepared and being ready and willing to work very hard at meetings and hearings. You know, some people show up and they don't work hard, but you know, for me,
it's mostly showing up and being prepared.
Being prepared and working hard and listening and taking. I have this thing about me. I've always taken copious notes in college and law school when I got my MBA. So, you know, I can always go back and reflect on other questions I've asked or constitutional issues or cases. So you put all that together, you show up at the hearing, and if you're prepared, you ask questions that are meaningful to the process, because these are lifetime appointed people, and the only way you can remove them is through impeachment. And that is a very, very difficult process. It hasn't been done in my lifetime. And so, you know, I generally prepare a list of questions, and my colleagues ask some good questions too, so there's sometimes some follow-up on some of the questions that they ask.
Yeah, and so, okay, on that note, I noticed on your website you say that the Governor's Council could play an instrumental role in the accountability of judges if they had to be reconfirmed by the Council after 6 years before earning lifetime terms. Can you explain a little bit about that?
I will. There was a bill filed in the legislature called the Judicial Accountability Act.
Judicial Accountability?
Yes.
How long ago was that filed?
Recently, in the last legislative session. It was sent to committee to die, basically. It was filed by Senator Ann Goby, a Democrat, who I'd spoken to about the legislation. In fact, tomorrow morning I'm meeting with a couple chiefs of police and 2 senators, Senator Goby and Senator Fatman, bipartisan, to discuss filing legislation again that would, I think, streamline and simplify the process so that judges would have to come back before the Governor's Council after a period of years, like some states do. Some judges have to answer to the voters after a period of time. Some are elected, which isn't a good idea, but where's that healthy balance? So what I have suggested is that there's a process in place. It would take a constitutional amendment, but that judges have to go back through the Governor's Council for reconfirmation. And if that couldn't be done immediately, because it'll take a long time to change the Constitution, 2 constitutional conventions, that in a minimum, have them come back and just have a review hearing, even if it's not binding until this other piece can be put in place, where you can ask questions and families can show up and chiefs of police can show up.
And give their perspective.
Right, and ask. And to be fair to the judges, I mean, we had that situation in Salem, okay? I'm sure a lot of people read about it. Those who didn't, a judge, a man pled guilty to not only possession of heroin, but intent to distribute heroin. He had that much heroin on him, pled guilty. The judge says during the colloquy that I'm not going to send you to jail because that was just a cash crime, and you were supporting your family. I have a big problem.
We all heard about that.
I have a big problem with that, okay? Totally backwards. It's not the addict supporting their habit. A cash crime is the worst. It's like sending someone outside, letting them go free with a loaded gun. They're killing people with heroin. So I'd love to see this judge, Judge Feely, back in front of the Governor's Council. So he has to answer to people as to why he said those incredibly insensitive things at a time where, you know, I'm sure everybody who watches this show, Sam, or everybody knows somebody who stood at a wake or a funeral and watched a 2 or 3-year-old cling to their parents' coffin and cry and not understand why they're never going to see their parents again. What an incredibly insensitive thing to say from the bench. It's that type of stuff that these people, these judges, need to be brought back in. And the good ones don't mind a review. I've spoken to them. I've asked nominees at hearings.
It's controversial judges.
That's right. It's the ones that maybe shouldn't have gotten...
The activist judges.
Yeah, and you know, that's a good point that you bring up, because when I got elected to the council in 2010, there had never been a single nominee defeated in 5 years. You're talking
a single nominee of the governor's
of
counselors.
the governor. Of the governor's nominees to be judges.
Oh,
so hundreds.
They're basically rubber stamped.
They were rubber stamps, and that was very, very frustrating to me, and that's why I ran in 2010, because just, you know, the last 2 weeks you could pick up any newspaper, read about Officer Gannon, read about that Judge Feely letting the heroin dealer walk out of court. Judge Feely, the judge who reduced the bail and ended up, the career criminal was up in Maine, he shot and killed that sheriff, that deputy sheriff. Pick up the paper, it hasn't changed. And, you know, the only way it's going to change is if you have meaningful review of these judges, and I've been fighting for that. So when I got on, it's a huge, I mean, hundreds of nominees, not a single nominee defeated in 5 years.
I thought I read it was something like 72 out of 74. Or
well, since 2000, since 2010, and prior to that, as I said, not a single nominee defeated. There have been over 10 nominees defeated, and in my opinion, they all should have been defeated. Recently, since
you've been elected.
That's right, and I think it's that perspective where, you know, there's a different focus. It's about public safety. It's not, hey, everybody wants to give somebody a break. And I think through my professional experience as a prosecutor, as a criminal defense attorney, civil criminal, you know, you recognize that there are good people who make mistakes and they need a break. You know, it's the guy driving home, he stopped to buy pizza and he had 2 beers and he got pulled over and now he's got an OUI and he's got 2 kids and he's the breadwinner and he's never had a record, and okay, you know, no accident, just you know.
Let's look at all the circumstances.
Yeah, okay, but then you got the people like that guy who shot and killed Officer Gannon, that coward, that career criminal, over 100 arrests on his record. This guy who should be in he should be in state prison, you know? So it's recognizing those 2 types of people and being able to vet these judicial nominees and put the right people on the bench. But you know, that's my focus, is public safety. You have another counselor who focuses on addiction and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we all bring a perspective.
You have a varied perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's important. You know, I don't sit up there and pretend to have all the answers. I've got some pretty smart people on the council. And
then you can play off of each other.
You do. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
That's how our council works.
That's how it worked when I was on the Board of Selectmen in Oxford for 10 years, you know. A fellow over there, John Sad, chairman of the board, or he was. I marched in the Memorial Day Parade with him. He's been on the Board of Selectmen for 40 years in Oxford. Staunch Democrat. And he and I work great together, you know. I brought this energy, some professional experience he didn't have. He had the continuity, he knew the town. And at the end of the day, we had such a great working Board of Selectmen, and we did some great things. And that's what it's about, you know, that's really what it's about.
What have you seen in the governor's appointments compared to Deval Patrick versus Governor Baker?
Well, you know, I don't know if you have any Game of Thrones fans out there.
I'm sure there are.
I don't take the knee for Republicans or Democrats. I have agreed with some of Deval Patrick appointments and voted for many of them. And I've agreed with some of Charlie Baker's appointments and voted for many of them. But I sit before you as the only Republican on the council who said no more than most of my Democratic colleagues on the governor's council to Charlie Baker's nominees. So, not a rubber stamp, not this gal.
Yep. Okay, and so just to back up way to the beginning, we have this picture that you provided. Yes. Can we pull this up on the screen of this is the first Governor's Council? Is that what this is?
It's not the first, but what's really interesting about this picture, a couple things. Paul Revere manufactured that chandelier.
Oh, wow.
So it went through candle, gasification, and then electricity. This is the governor's corner office. I was in there today. The lieutenant governor swore in a housing court nominee. But these are these desks, which maybe you can't see, but those are the original desks from the governor's council. Those are back in our chambers. They refurbished those.
Cool.
And so this is the setup. The governor, I believe that's Governor Robertson. And the governor or lieutenant governor will sit there, and then the councilors all sit around the chamber.
And this is 1700s?
1885.
1885.
1885.
I was off by a century.
And you know, things have changed a little. You notice there are no women in that picture. You know, it's funny when I pulled that up. it was brought to my attention that I'm the first woman to ever hold the 7th District Governor's Council seat.
Really?
And the council was created by the Massachusetts Constitution in 1780, so that was kind of
1780.
So that was kind of neat. Yeah, the founding fathers created the Governor's Council as a constitutional office. So yeah, that's really neat, and it's very much.
And it looks almost today like it did back then.
It does.
140 years ago.
It does. It does. So that's a pretty interesting stuff.
So now, on that note of the existence of a governor's council, there's only 2 states in the whole country that has a governor's council like we have, right?
Yes.
And I mean, obviously, you are a governor's counselor, so you have an inherent bias to your position. But it's been argued that the duties of the governor's council could be taken away and given to Senate judicial committees or that kind of thing. Can you speak to your opinions to that?
I would be happy to. When I got on the council, they wanted to abolish the council because it was a rubber stamp. And then what happened was nominees, the accountability volume went up, let's just put it that way. And then it was, oh gosh, you know, they're having a hard time getting some of these nominees through who probably shouldn't have gotten through because they just write big checks and then they get nominated to be judges. That stuff happens. And so then we started defeating nominees, and you know, I'm hyper, you know, sensitive to qualifications, and you know, I'm not afraid to say no. And so then the debate shifted to let's get rid of them because now people aren't getting through the council. And there was a suggestion by a senator, or some senators, that the Senate should take over it. And you know, our system isn't perfect, but we're all duly elected. We answer to the voters every 2 years. And honestly, I mean, I think that would be the worst thing that could happen is if it became a duty of the Senate. I mean, I think politics is full of a lot of corruption. We don't allow certain donations once somebody applies to the council, to us. There's an executive order to members of the council. And I'll never forget, there was a senator who said, well, Jen, he was from my district, I'm going to vote against the abolition of the council because it was a constitutional convention to discuss it. He said, but please don't say anything too critical about the Senate taking over if that were to happen. I said, okay, I won't, Senator. So I get a call from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, and they asked me that same question. You asked me, well, what are your thoughts about the Senate taking over? And I said, well, I said, really? I said, you talk about a shakedown that would make a thug on the streets of Chicago blush. Well, isn't that the quote in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette? And I get a call
and then you get
from
the call
Senator,
like, hey!
Jen, I thought you were going to take it easy. I said, well, you know, they asked me, Senator, and, you know, so, you know, our system isn't perfect, but look, we had some pretty...
And also, are you, the majority of the governor's council, are you attorneys?
Most of us are. There are 2 who are not lawyers. So one is a real estate broker, and she's really
And you would
good
think that with, you know, an attorney background, you know, that's really what you'd want if you're approving judges and parole, and that's really the world that you you live in.
I would absolutely agree, and I would even take it one step further. You really, in my opinion, need people with criminal law experience, because how are you going to vet a nominee about a bail issue if you don't know anything about bail, you don't know about the criteria, you've never been in court, you've never litigated cases, you've never argued a bail hearing, you've never defended a bail hearing. And, you know, I point to a woman who was confirmed by the council, a judge, who was famously in the paper, another example, who let an Uber driver accused of raping a young college student literally walk out the back door of her court on $250 cash bail, an illegal immigrant who to this day has never been found. And I can tell you that judge went through the council and the vote was 7-1. And you can guess who was the one vote against her, and I'm very proud of that vote. And she was a political hack who never should have went on the bench. And who knows where that person is, and that victim will never have justice. And I brought my law thesis with me. I didn't know if you'd ask me why I first ran for the Governor's Council, but you know, victims' rights and public safety, as I said, have always been so important to me. And at the time, there was a constitutional amendment to the United States Constitution to create victims' rights, like criminal defendants have, the right to a speedy trial. And it was a series of rights that was proposed by Dianne Feinstein, pretty liberal Democrat from California, a smart lady, and former Senator John Kyle from Arizona, pretty conservative guy. So these two got together and came up with this legislation, and they proposed it, and it almost passed. But I wrote my law thesis in 1998 all about that and how
on victims' rights.
Victims' rights, and how our country passing the Victims' Rights Amendment, a nation's march toward a more perfect union. And some of the stories that I read about and researching about these just horrible crimes. One family's daughter was just tortured for hours, tied to a tree and murdered. And the judge threw the family out of the courtroom during the trial because the judge said that they were not conducting themselves in a way that would give the defendant a fair trial. And you know, when you read the transcripts, they were not acting inappropriately. So, you know, not an issue that I thought about the night before my political brochures were being printed up. It was 1998, just a few years ago.
Just a few.
Just a few, but you know, the stuff, it burns. It's something I'm very passionate about. And as I said, you read those stories in the newspaper any given day. I mean, we could pick up the newspaper tomorrow and read. It's very frustrating, and I think the taxpayers and people of Massachusetts have every right to be very frustrated with the lack of accountability with the judges.
All right. Thank you so much. Jen Casey, our Republican incumbent governor's council candidate for the 7th District. Would you like to tell the people watching maybe your website, your phone number, how they can learn more about you?
Sure. They can go to the Governor's Council website. All my contact information is on there. I do have a website, www.jencasey.com. I'm accessible by phone, and that's the nice thing about being in the courts and actually practicing and trying cases, is that you really meet all the attorneys in the area. And I can't tell you how much feedback I get from lawyers who know other lawyers, or people, constituents, non-lawyers who are professionals, or people in neighborhoods who come up to me and approach me and say, this person's really good for these reasons, this person's really bad. So people know where to find me. I've been to Fitchburg so many times that I think my car could drive itself. My daughter Sydney loves Civic Days.
I'm a big fan.
Huge fan. Can't get her out of the bouncy houses, and she needs a tubby, to say the least, when we leave, and marching the parades up here. So I'm around. I've been around. I try to be all over the district and accessible to all the people who I represent.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to have the Fitchburg Emergency Management Agency come on. Hi, Sam Squalia here with Susan Navarre from the Fitchburg Historical Society, and we're talking about your new exhibit that's coming up Monday, June 18th, the Generation on Wheels, Ivor Johnson and the Early Days of Sports.
Exactly. Well, Ivor Johnson bikes were made in Fitchburg, and each year in the summer we like to do an exhibition about the Ivor Johnson bikes because they're very highly regarded. Collectors all around the country are interested in them, around the country and even around the world.
Yeah, you have some that are refurbished and some that are just taken, they look like they're taken right out of the attic.
Exactly. Those are the as-found ones, and sometimes they are. They're just like they came out of the barn or something. So we have an exhibition of those, and then this year we're showing lots and lots of extra things about the Ivor Johnson Company and about the early days of sports, because the 1890s, when bicycling became a big fad and Ivor Johnson became one of the most important bike makers, the sports for men and women in general became popular as a way to stay healthy. And so we think of that as always having been around, but really it only started about 120 years ago.
And it tells a historical tale about, you know, the people of the city of Fitchburg.
Absolutely.
In the bike culture as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, especially because Ivor Johnson was also a sporting goods company. So they marketed and sold many things in their sporting goods stores. So we have information about their sporting goods stores, examples of things from boats and games and tennis rackets and all sorts of things.
And that's going to be on display?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, great. And so let's see, we have, this is a Wallace exhibition.
Yes.
And the hours are Monday through Wednesdays.
So on On Mondays and Tuesdays, it's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then
Okay.
on Wednesdays, 10 to 6. And then we have extra hours during the lingeries. We have, we'll be open on that Sunday, July 1st in Fitchburg from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then also we'll be open on the day of the block party because everybody comes to town during the block party.
Oh, yeah, thousands of people.
Exactly. We really have hundreds and hundreds that drop in at the Historical Society. So we'll be open that
the
night.
Civic Days block party, that's July 3rd.
Yep.
So the Historical Society will be open, as will this Ivor Johnson exhibition, and the Longs Joe Classic in its 57th year. That will be Sunday, July 1st in Fitchburg, and Saturday, June 30th in Leominster as well.
Yes, exactly. And then we're having another special event during the exhibition, which is that local historian Peter Capadagli, who's studied Ivor Johnson bikes very thoroughly, will be doing a talk about the history of the Ivor Johnson Company, and it's a wonderful talk. Even if you know a lot about historic bikes, you will learn something new and a lot of fun stories to share at your next cocktail party.
He's great, and that'll be standing room only, I'm sure.
right.
What's the date of Peter Capadagli's Ivor Johnson talk?
That's going to be on Thursday, July 25th at 6:30 p.m., and it's free at the Historical Society.
Fantastic. What a great opportunity that we have. Thank you so much, Susan, for telling us about the Ivor Johnson exhibition that's coming up. And to find out more, you can go to fitchburghistoricalsociety.org.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. And welcome back to Discussing Fitchburg Now. We have our Fitchburg Emergency Management Agency team, a select team here. Welcome, everybody. We have Mike, Nisha, Dave, and John. We have the chief, right? The lieutenant, training director, and the captain.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Fitchburg Emergency Management. What do we do?
Basically, we help out the fire department. We help out the public. We do a lot of pumping of cellars in the winter when your cellar floods.
When it's and ice outside and the water
yeah.
can't.
Yes.
Yeah, that's been our primary function for a long time. We over the past few
Emergency sump pumping?
years. Yeah, we've got into sheltering. That's a big thing.
When it's too cold?
Funding wise, yeah,
Well, we've done sheltering just this past winter with the Salvation Army and
Oh, yes.
our father's house.
when it
at
was
the-
freezing for
Yes,
yeah.
that was
a good week, 2 weeks?
about 2 weeks. We were doing daytime sheltering with them. We have done sheltering when the tropical storm came through. What was that, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago? At the senior center, which is our primary shelter. I'm also the shelter manager for the emergency shelter manager for the city of Fitchburg.
The emergency shelter manager.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
See, when I hear about the shelter, I don't hear it advertised as the Fitchburg Emergency Management. You're like the unspoken heroes.
It's opened
Yeah.
by the health department first,
yes,
and then behind the scenes, the equipment that we need, that's where we come in.
yes.
The emergency generators and
The cots.
Yeah, the cots.
the cots, okay.
We have the cots. We have the setups. We have the paperwork.
have
A
a
lot
whole
of times
trailer
we'll be
full.
working with the
Trailer full of equipment.
Yes.
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 Shelter equipment. Are we talking about shelter
Yeah.
equipment?
And
I
also
mean, we're
we
talking about
will-
lots of equipment, I'm
We
sure.
also store equipment at the armory itself as a startup, and if more is needed, then we go over with our trailer.
For emergency shelters.
Yes.
Yes. But we have, over the years, we've done sheltering during snowstorms. We've done sheltering, as
The
I
ice
said,
storm.
during extreme cold.
During tropical storms?
Tropical
like
storms,
if we
extreme
lose
heat.
power, like the ice storm?
Yes.
The ice storm was
Actually,
quite busy.
Yes. We were working during the ice storm out of the senior center, and from what I understand, with the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, and a number of other agencies, and the feeding center, which was doing the food, also was helping feed the shelter in Lunenburg as well.
Uh-huh. So you act almost regionally.
We do.
The times that we have set up a shelter with the Red Cross, it has been the regional shelter. We just completed a training with CM DART, which is the Central Mass
Disaster Animal Response Team.
Okay.
So it's the same thing, but
Only with animals.
with your animals.
Because people often won't leave their house
Exactly.
if they can't bring their dog.
That's exactly
What
why.
if, you know, like I have no heat, but I'm not going to leave my dog.
Right.
Right.
They'll go sleep in their
Right.
car maybe.
And
Yes.
then they're allowed to be with their pet, you know, during the day, and the pet is going to be safe versus
Right.
you not knowing what's.
So it's like a kenneling kind of system.
Exactly.
It's
It
a
is.
full
Kenneling shelter.
It's a
It
full
wouldn't be in the
operation.
same shelter, but it would be close by, kind of like how it was during the ice storm at the library.
Okay. So you say you largely assist the fire department as well. What are some of the things that you assist with the fire department?
That would be the pumping of cellars. Normally, during the day, they'll do. If there's only a few, they'll do the pumping. If it gets larger, if it becomes more, they'll call us in and pretty much we'll take care of it, and they can go about and doing what they're supposed to be doing. We also provide lighting at accident scenes, crime scenes.
You bring the big generator
Yeah.
lights. I know that you
We
come
have
help
the-
out with the Winterfest.
Yeah,
You
do
come
the
and help
tower
with the big
lights.
lights,
fireworks.
fireworks.
You know, that's all, and anybody can request us as long as we have enough notice. We did actually a movie scene for Glenn
Oh, okay.
a
Yeah.
couple years back, so we provided lighting there.
Perfect.
But you know, we're open to almost anything.
You're not just for emergencies.
No,
No.
we're
Rodeo,
a
we
public.
did the concerts, we've did the car show at the airport, we did the lighting, all the generators.
The rodeos
Yeah.
that they have down
That sounds
there.
like fun.
That is.
Yes.
So basically, we're a group of volunteers that, if asked by the community, whatever the organization is, we will provide assistance. We are all volunteers. There's about 16 of us at this time. Always looking for new recruits. We have folks from all different backgrounds. So we have nurses, we have correctional officers, we've had
I'm an EMT.
EMTs. I mean,
Yep.
the gauntlet. We've
A
had
different
hospice
perspective
workers.
and valued skills.
Everybody brings a certain skill set of their own unique value to the table, and that's why our cohort is so able to be diverse in the projects that we take on or the things that are asked of us, because we're just flexible. You know, and if anybody is interested, do that. You can find us on Facebook and just send us a message. We'll walk you through the process.
The Fitchburg Emergency Management Agency, right on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yes.
FEMA.
Call our
FEMA.
director.
FEMA. Call the director.
and
Easy application
Director
process.
Rich Liberatore.
Rich Liberatore.
From the Fitchburg Fire Department.
Yes.
He'd be happy to walk you through.
Yes.
almost
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And so you have 16 volunteer members of the Fitchburg Emergency
There's
Management.
about a little over a third of us that are active.
A third of you of
Yeah.
the 16 that are active. And
Right.
how many total would you like to have?
About 30.
30.
At
The
Active.
goal is 30.
Active.
30 active.
Yeah.
So
That would be-
45-ish
The thing is-
total.
The thing is
Statistically,
not everybody
right.
can be there at the same time.
Right.
So if you get 10 or 15 people for an incident, and then an incident later, only 3 of those people show up, but at least you get people there to help. That's the main thing. Life now is just so busy.
Yeah.
So we can't rely on the small membership that we have. We
Yep.
need to
To expand.
So
expand.
And I mean, you get varied skills. You get a camaraderie of people. You get to do fun events, and then you get to do the dirty work and learn
We do.
different skills.
We do.
So, what kind of qualifications are you looking for in a candidate?
Mostly a passion to be a volunteer. It does take a certain unique attribute for somebody to want to volunteer. We have the option to provide folks with a minimum amount of hours. If they want to only do 5 hours a month, they can do 5 hours a month. If they want to expand any training, we provide all free training. Yeah, he's our training instructor.
Our training.
So we also incorporate the trainings with the Red Cross. So you can become CPR first aid certified, you can become disaster and sheltering response certified. We also are all CERT certified, which is, we're all CERT team. So it's community
emergency response team.
Community.
Yes.
And we provide
like
all
DART,
of it. Except
That is,
CERT.
that is our main.
Yes.
That is one of our main trainings that we do. That
CERT.
is one of our main aspects of emergency management is the CERT team.
You really need to
We
be CERT
are
trained if you're going to be an active volunteer in the emergency management.
One of the few CERT teams in central Massachusetts in this area.
Really?
That's
Yes.
that's active.
Active.
That is active.
There are a lot out there, but some towns only have a director, and that's really all that's required of them.
But we have at least 16, and we're looking for double that.
Yes.
We're always
Yes.
looking for more help.
Because
And eager to train.
it's
We have
coming down the
people-
line, and you know, you never know when things get quiet, and then the weather gets worse and worse and worse, and you get a bad hurricane that comes through. It's going to be a disaster situation, and that's when we're called
So
in.
if you're ready to jump in and be on the front lines and help your community, then you want to call up the Fitchburg Emergency Management Agency and see how you can help.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yes.
And so now you say that there's a 5-hour commitment, you know, that you could accommodate. What is your average, you know, if I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, what are they really going to want from me?
So there's never an obligation to commit to a certain amount of hours. We don't have a time limit or
Family
restriction.
and job comes first. That's always been.
Yes. So we put the call out there. We'll put an event out there. Say it's Civic Days. We put it out in advance. We put most of our calls we try to plan ahead with, and it's optional if a volunteer is available to take it or not. Most calls, when we do the fire department or more the emergency response type, pumping basements, we do have to respond in a 2-man crew, a minimum. So there's always the opportunity to do those. They do come seasonally. You know, when the snow melts, we'll probably have some more pump calls. If we have a lot of heavy rain, we'll have some pump calls. If the water tables are high, we'll have pump calls. So it's seasonal, and you can be as active and engaged as you would like, but there's no pressure or requirements for it.
There are some people that can't do that physically.
Right.
That would only rather be part of the shelter, which is good, and that's okay. We don't care. You're helping, so.
Yep.
That's the
Everyone
biggest
has
part.
varied skills that they bring to the
We
table.
have folks that hand out coffee. You know, we have those warming stations where we
Yeah.
work collaboratively with other organizations. We can just hand out coffee. We can hand out food, blankets. They can even just be present, even if it's just bodies in a room to help funnel folks to a certain area, or with the pet sheltering. I mean,
That sounds like
this
that
is
sounds like
something
We
we're
also-
just trying, and we're excited to do it. So, you know, check out CM DART. You can get certified through them for pet sheltering operations. But
We
they're
also-
looking for volunteers too. So.
Right. We also respond to, like, if there's a second or third alarm that goes out on a fire, we also respond to the fire scene, and we help with empty bottles of oxygen. We'll take them back to the station, and we also hand out water and
Just takes
working with
them,
hose sometimes. you
takes
know?
them away from having to do it. It's
Right.
one less thing they have to worry about.
Yep.
you can assist the firefighters
Right.
With
when they're in
lighting
need.
as well. With
Right.
lighting as well.
Lighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Paperwork. So if anybody's heavy on the admin skills, we always like someone to be able to make those phone calls, send the text messages, send the emails.
To recruit the volunteers.
Absolutely, or even just to coordinate efforts.
Coordinate efforts.
Any of those types of things. There's always little projects we can create on our own, and we're pretty good about if we have a dry spell, we'll find something to do. The Athol Ice Dam, I kind of spearheaded that and said, let's go help Athol. You know, and they're like, Athol, but it's part of our community. If something affects them down Route 2, it's going to
And they
eventually
appreciate
trickle
Fitchburg
here.
coming to help. So
They
you're
do.
you're like community ambassadors as well.
They do. And we want people to know that we're present and we're here, and we're a very passionate group of volunteers that if someone's basement floods at 2 in the morning and it's an emergency situation,
Guess what? I'm up
getting out of bed
these
and
four
we're going to
right
work.
here will
You get the
will
call,
be
you're
there.
like, I'm ready to help.
We'll be there.
And the more you do it, it makes you feel good doing it. You learn a skill. and you make friends.
Yeah.
We do. There's a lot of people that don't know what we're about until they make the phone call and say, help.
Yeah.
You know?
And so they can call up the Fitchburg Fire Department and speak to Rich Liberatore and ask to come in and meet maybe on one of your trainings and get a feel for what you do.
Yeah, if they want to put an application in, that's always welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for
our
having us.
Fitchburg Emergency Management Agency, our FEMA. So you can contact the Fitchburg Fire Department, speak to Rich Liberatore, and see if you want to get involved with what the Fitchburg Emergency Management does. Thank you so much for watching our show. We'll see you later.